Hello and welcome to the Nailed on FPL podcast with John and Kris. Today we're going to have a bit of a random chat about FPL. We're going to do it a bit differently, back to the kind of podcast format where we're going to go over all sorts of things, but it's going to be packed with some nice useful insight. Where do we start this off, Kris? We haven't planned it out. What's your starting point for this?
Well, I guess we probably want to have a look at how we've done so far this season first. Obviously, you've had a pretty good start, John. Obviously, top 10k at the moment. Myself, I think about 180k. So, I mean, it's been okay. I've been climbing for the last few months, but not really where I want to be and where I thought I'd be at this point of the season. How are you feeling about where you are at the moment in terms of rank and plans going forward?
Well, obviously, I'm delighted to be in the top 10k. I know, especially on Twitter, that's seen as a bit of a kind of milestone. I think a lot of people that take this game way more serious than they probably should, and I'm certainly guilty of that. They almost see anything outside of the top 10k as a bit of a failure. I think that's very hard on yourself because there's a lot of variance in the game. You shouldn't be disheartened. I mean, as I say, Kris and I don't think that we have majorly differed in our decision making. Yet there's quite a big disparity in our rank. And can I just draw attention to game week 1? I opened with Mane. I opened with Salah. You opened with Mane. You had the captaincy on him. I think right there, what was that? A 30-point swing, given a very
36
marginal
points, just the 36.
Yeah.
Obviously, Mane made a little bit back the following couple of weeks after that, but then he got COVID, and it was then I had to take a -4 to get him out. So I think it's been a bit of a season of special circumstances, isn't it? I mean, with all the COVID stuff that we've had, the crazy start of the season in terms of all the goals. So yeah, massive amounts of variance. My triple captaincy with Salah at the weekend obviously hasn't gone to plan. So yeah, it's little things that may have been a good decision, just hasn't paid off. And I think you put out a good point that I think top 10k is a lot harder to achieve than it was maybe 2-3 years ago, because not just because of the sheer number of players there are, but also because of how many tools that there are available, how many, like the platform of YouTube and Twitter and stuff like that. There's so much information, lots of managers taking it more seriously. So there's a better quality of managers out there as well, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise you need to kind of battle through, but I think once you navigate it correctly, there's some, as you said, some really good tools out there. A lot of which we use ourselves, and I think there's a few things we've been doing for some time. Like I personally have been using bookie goal scorer odds for going back for years, actually, probably maybe 4 or 5 years, and I think that's come onto the scene more in the last couple of years. I think the Reddit was a really good resource for me as well over the years. In a matter of fact, I think going back maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I used to lurk the FISO forums, and nothing against that. There's some really good stuff there, like especially when it's some very kind of team-focused insight on a player that is second in line to start when there's an injured first-team player, for example. Yeah. And that kind of insight, I'm only going to pick up on those kind of forums. I'm never going to know that some obscure player who's never played a minute of the Premiership is next in line. But now with Twitter and whatnot, and I've only just started using Twitter, a bit late to the party, I see that there's some amazing stuff out there, but you have a hell of a lot to navigate through. There's this kind of what's the word for it? It's kind of, there's a lot of rubbish to navigate through. Honestly, you get these bandwagons, the perfect way to sum it up. I don't know if you agree. Once there's kind of almost like a Twitter crowd consensus I've got on certain players, and that player becomes essential. And I like to take a step back and figure out for myself whether I think that player is essential and how they fit into my.
But then I guess on the other side to it, so if you look at game week 19, so double game week, obviously Antonio was back fit. I mean, I think he was selected by at least 40% of teams. I think if that was a couple of years ago, it probably would have been more of a differential for the likes of us who sort of,
Yeah.
I guess, looked at goal scorer odds, looked at the fixtures more than, and understood about double game weeks and stuff like that, whereas not everyone did maybe a couple of years ago. Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't have seen that many people on Antonio, for example.
Yeah. It's a
But
perfect example. It's a perfect example. 2 easy fixtures. And because of that, I mean, his goal scorer odds are going to be pretty low. And we know on paper, like, his expected points as a result of his goal scoring chances is going to be really high. And I completely agree with you. The standards raised. And on top of that, there's 7 million plus players. So, I mean, top 10K, what that represents, what's that, the top 0.01% or something. It's an obscurely low percentage. I mean, I think a lot of people want to just win their mini leagues. A lot of people do money mini leagues, whether that's a tenner, 20 quid or £100. There's some big money staked. And I think a lot of people think they can just go on FPL and they can quickly look at their team and make a transfer. But I think once you it's a bit of a can of worms, unfortunately, but you can go so far with it. And I think there's a lot of method behind the madness. A lot of these players that are finishing season after season good rank, it's not out of pure luck and just quickly picking a team. You can't just recommend a captain each week or a player to bring in. You need to plan ahead and formulate a strategy around your team.
Yeah, and I think that obviously there will be variances throughout the season, an element of luck, if you like, in terms of where you sort of end up finishing. But a lot of the time, as you say, you're going to have a decent rank at the end of it, as long as you're making good decisions and using, well, as you say, navigating a lot of the noise that's there and sort of concentrating on the stuff that's, proven to be successful. So stuff like goal scorer odds, for example, as you mentioned, John. Maybe a couple of years ago, I definitely didn't use them at all. But that might have just been because I'm lazy and they weren't readily available. Obviously, there's stuff
You are lazy.
But you know what I mean? You'd have to go through sort of every fixture to find it. It would take time, whereas now it's readily available. FPL Salah on Twitter. If you don't follow him already, he's a good person to follow in terms of, straight away before the game week, you can see anytime goal scorer odds for the most popular picks, clean sheet odds and stuff like that. And probably, the last couple of years I've used that stuff really seriously and definitely seen a improvement in my own performance by using stuff like that.
Yeah, I think whilst we're talking about kind of good resources, and I know goal scorer odds is definitely one. Some of the odds I see posted on Twitter from various users, I see them on Reddit as well. Sometimes they tend to differ sometimes. Just from I've been betting a long time. In previous episodes, I reference odds a lot, and it's a huge part of my personal game. Obviously, we both use them. They do tend to fluctuate, and that's really important because one of the best ways that you're going to be able to grasp the actual probability of a goal going in is by looking at the bookie that's giving the best odds, because bookies still need to make money. And if a bookie's willing to give the best possible price, these are the people that are risking making as little margin as possible. It's quite complicated, but every single outcome has a correct kind of money line that needs to sit on a certain price. And if a bookie goes out of line and the price is too big, then in theory they should attract a lot of money and that price should come down. I don't know. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent there, but what I'm saying is using odds checker, going into the game one by one to look at goal scorer odds, clean sheet odds. That's what I've been doing. I personally think that's the best way to do it, and that will always give you a list of all the bookmakers, and you want to look at the best possible price a bookmaker's offering. That's just, I'd like to say, the really good tip is use goal scorer odds. More of an advanced tip and maybe an over the top one, which I think I've been using for the last 4 or 5 years. Use odds checker and get the best price to really know where you stand.
Or
sorry for that
just follow FPL Salah because he already uses odds checker, does it for you.
You say that though, but
he
then
does.
Are you sure? Because I definitely.
No, I asked him. He said he uses odds checker. Yeah.
Oh well, then okay, there we go. FPL Salah's your guy.
You're wasting a lot of time doing it, but
yeah, hours each week going through odds check.
Yeah, I know, but obviously he posts it at a moment in time, and obviously that can change. So it's always worth checking, whether it be on the day of the deadline or the day before, just to get that up-to-date view. And there's easy, to Google, converting odds to implied probability. That's probably another episode is around implied probability, but yeah. So I guess what else do we want to talk about there, John? Maybe what other sort of tools have brought us success. So it might be worth mentioning something like FPL Review, which is a really good site that's only really come to the forefront maybe the last year. I think there's a lot of websites out there that do predicted points. Fantasy Football Fix, I think Fantasy Football Fallout have something. But a lot of those are just based on odds and that's it. And it's quite hard when, you bring in other variances like assists and stuff like that. So I think FPL Review, their data model, without going into too much detail, has been really beneficial, hasn't it?
Yeah. We stumbled across this maybe just over a year ago, and I mean, huge credit to the creator behind this, an absolute genius to put something like this together. And it's a free resource, which kind of blows my mind as well, because I think I read a post, maybe it was again last season on Reddit, and what he'd actually done is he has two different models. One is based on, and apologies if some of this is, if the creator just happens to listen to this video and is face palming whilst I'm trying to describe what his product is. Apologies in advance.
You'll have to come on and tell everyone about it.
Well, I mean, we're huge advocates for sure. But the two kind of data sets he uses, one's based on implied odds using the bookmakers, which is already really powerful, as we've been talking about, and something we've been using for years. The other one is based on his own personal massive data model. And I know he actually ran a series of graphs and tests last season, which actually showed his model to come out slightly on top, which is quite incredible to have a model which is better at predicting FPL points than the bookmakers. That is, I mean, obviously this guy is extremely clever to develop that. But either way, whatever one of those two versions you use, it will calculate how many. So this week, let's just put it in context. If we release this before game week 20, the overwhelming favourite for captaincy is going to be Bruno Fernandes. And I think his expected points are going to be around 7. And that will be the highest of any player by a nice little margin. And in both of his models, it's got Bruno coming out on top. And it's literally working out how likely it is for Bruno to score, how likely it is for him to assist, to keep a clean sheet for that 1 point, how likely it is for him to accrue bonus points, 2 points chance to play the 2 points as well. So the amount of minutes he's going to play on the pitch, which is maybe the only iffy bit with the software, but it's incredible. It calculates all of that and comes up with a projected point score. And at the end of the day, no matter how much you think you know about football, the model is probably better. I hate to say it. So if you think that, let's say, actually, I'm going to captain Van der Beek this week. He played in the FA Cup. I like the look of him. I think he's going to start, and I think he's going to do better than Bruno. That's some people have these gut hunches, and they go with picks that they justify as a differential, and they love it because differential doesn't sound too bad. In my eyes, that's just a terrible pick. You keep calm. You look at the points, and Bruno's a clear favourite. Easy decision. Again, sorry for the rant, Kris. I should shut up. Just tell me to shut up when I go off like that. But you see the point I'm making. It's a really powerful tool. Make some of these marginal decisions. And
it's really good when it comes to planning ahead as well. So you can look at projections over the next 5 game weeks. Really good for double game week planning, blank game week planning. When we free hitted, it was easy to look at. For that game week 18, who had the most projected points, who was the best value. So really powerful tool. It's helped me already this week in terms of, obviously the De Bruyne injury is going to be on everyone's mind. Who do you replace him with? And if I was looking at it just from almost a football knowledge perspective, I might think, you know what, someone like Gundogan, I don't fancy him. I think he's just on a bit of a purple patch. He's not known for scoring goals in the past and stuff like that. But if you look at the predicted model, he's right up there with, projected points over the next 3 weeks. Obviously, the fixtures help that. And this is where it's almost, as John said, it is better than your gut. I mean, I think there was an element of, eye test and having a sort of gut feel, but maybe managing that to not going crazy with all of your transfers and captaincy choices, as you said. Yeah, I think Van der Beek's probably, I'd be very shocked if anyone captained him, but I think I know what you mean. If we look at it, say if Calvert-Lewin was at home to Wolves or something like that, and he's in good form, someone might go, oh, well, I'm going to captain Calvert-Lewin. But really, projected points for that game is going to be around 5.5 maybe. And then you compare that to Bruno. Bruno still comes out on top. So you might think, oh, everyone in my mini league is going to captain Bruno and I need to catch up. So I'm going to captain DCL. That's the sort of decision that may pay off once every now and then, but it's not going to pay off in the long run if you're making consistent decisions like that. I don't know if you want to add anything more to that.
No, spot on. It's a marathon, and people that make kind of short-term sporadic transfers or captaincies are generally going to be stung in the long term. And just touching on, you know exactly why I mentioned Van der Beek, Kris. But famously, Kris drafted the FPL draft format. Kris took him in the second round.
I did not take him in the second round. It was the last round. No one else.
It was the last round. We've took the mick out of him a little bit, but yeah. I just took El Ghazi and he's been dropped altogether, so I can't. Well,
I did tell you.
He hasn't started the last two, so I can't really speak. But yeah, I think so. FPL review and using bookie odds. That's two really good ways of making tough decisions, and they really are going to apply to just about everything, especially defenders as well. Clean sheet odds is a really big one because you're going to find yourself a lot of the time with two players who you believe to have similar fixtures. So you might have a Saints and a Leeds player in your team this week. Both of them, I believe, Leeds are away to Newcastle, Saints are at home to Arsenal. So on paper, fairly similar difficulty fixtures, I'd say. I'm referring to the defence actually. So do you play someone like Dallas or Walker Peters this week? It's really these little marginal decisions, whilst it doesn't make a big difference in the short term, again, in the long run, these will start to add up, and you'll start kind of actually justifying some of your decisions without just kind of going on your gut. Because as good as your brain is at making FPL decisions, there's a multitude of different factors to bring into the balance, and you have so many amazing resources in front of you. It's kind of common sense almost to kind of bring these into the mix and let them aid your decision making as well. So we're not all alone, like approaching this as kind of lone wolves doing nothing. That's just I think a good point to touch on.
Yeah. Okay. So do we want to talk about the second half of the season then? Maybe what you're expecting to plan to do in terms of, obviously there's double game week 24 potentially with City coming up, double game week 26, and there's obviously a few blanks from 29 onwards as well, with a couple of other double game weeks. What are your thoughts there?
So first of all, I think this is getting pretty complicated. Once we start looking ahead, so again, in the Twitter FPL community, there's some absolute geniuses. We've mentioned it before. Ben Crellin is amazing at planning potential double game weeks in the future. We know when we look at, and also blank game weeks, when we look at certain teams and we can see they have games in hand, you can look at that and you can say, well, Villa have 2 games in hand. I should target Villa players. And that by itself is kind of maybe the first layer of a good solid strategy behind some of the transfers you're thinking about. If it's a marginal decision between bringing in, say, Antonio or Watkins, I would now lean towards Watkins because knowing that that's in the back. So that's one thing. But then the next layer is then working out when these fixtures could potentially be, and then bringing that into your decision making. And if we just touch on what we know, first of all, a better source of information is go to Twitter, look at Ben Crellin. But there's going to be a big double game week in 26, isn't there, Kris? And we have a list of some teams that are likely to double in that week.
Yeah, I'm just opening it now.
It's literally it's Ben's tweet, and
well, yeah, I mean it's a lot of the top teams really. So yeah, the team most likely you got Man City, Spurs, Liverpool, Chelsea, Man U, Leicester, Palace, and Burnley, and then there's the likes of Saints, Villa, and Everton that could potentially also double as well. So lots to think about there. So really, I would look at that tweet and think, okay, well, I probably need to almost look at, well, we know that Man City are going to double in 24. We know that they're most likely to double in 26 as well. It's a really good time to jump on City players. Similar with Spurs as well. They're going to have probably the most favourable double game week in 26 out of the team. So, you know, can I be getting? Obviously, lots of managers would have got rid of Kane and Son for the double game week because obviously they didn't have 2 games. For those that held on, obviously they did pretty well in the end. So you should be okay there. But obviously they've got a little bit of a tricky run now, but they're quite difficult to. I've done it a few times, probably dropping them and then bringing them back in again. It's quite hard to sustain that going forward because you lose a lot of value a lot of the time. But it's not the worst thing in the world if you're swapping premiums around when they've got a more favourable fixture run.
Yeah, there's a few interesting points you've touched on there, and I think if we come back to value, because that's a whole debate in itself, and it would be good to touch on that value versus points. Should you worry about sacrificing $500,000 for a 1 week switch on a player where you think you can benefit by say 5 to 10 points? And that, you know, there's a debate there. But as you were saying, yeah, with the double game weeks coming up, they're generally stronger teams that a lot of us have in our team or are probably already targeting. Like Leicester assets are looking pretty good right now. Man City, obviously. Spurs, Kane and Son is easy mode FPL. Just pick them in your team. Neither of us have them, or did you hold on to one?
No, I got rid of both of them for the double, which didn't go well because De Bruyne and Vardy didn't do much.
But that's okay. You know? Yeah,
this is where we come back to. If I look to obviously FPL review, this is where you can sort of look at that and go, well, that model doesn't work because I was projected 14 points from De Bruyne. I was projected 12, 13 points from Vardy. And they got 12 between them, whereas Kane and Son got, I think, 15 between them. And obviously, then you take into account hits and stuff like that. But I think 9 times out of 10, something like that probably does pay off. And
I wouldn't even say 9 times out of 10. Like with FPL, honestly, the best way to summarize it is the variance just wildly fluctuates on a week by week basis. Go back to our game week 1 example with the Salah Mane. Like that was a horrific fall for you, like game week 1. And that was not like the difference in points would have been a couple of points difference expected. Yet one walks away with 20 points.
Yeah.
The other one walks away with 1. Didn't Mane get like a 2.
No, it was 2.
So, it can be a brutal game, but I think as you demonstrated by kind of sticking to your guns and playing your game, you quickly clawed back, catching up with some of the better managers. And you quickly found yourself back in, say, the top 1 million at the beginning of the season, which is really where you want to be. And you're now in a pretty favorable position, even though you're in 180K. I truly believe you have every chance of making top 10K. Yes, you need a few kind of luck to be on your side to an extent.
Yeah.
But if you keep making optimal decisions, you're certainly going to be up there because people are going to make mistakes all around you. People will not be prepared as well as you are for these double game weeks coming up.
Yeah, and I think we've already seen that over the free hit and the double game week in 18 and 19, where even though I felt like it could have gone better, it was still a nice climb from where I was. Excuse me.
Bless you. Bless you. I think that's a nice. The sneeze takes us on to our next point, which is points versus value. You mentioned that points versus value, and this is an interesting one because I feel that it's something that Twitter, something that the Reddit as well are completely obsessed by, which is players going up and down in value. We all know it's a good thing because you have more money to spend on players, and there'll be a time in the season where a number of premium assets will be essential. and it will only be people who've managed to kind of accumulate a certain amount of team value are able to bring them in. To be honest, so my opinion, I strongly favour on the side of the debate, which is don't take unnecessary risks for the sake of 0.1 million. So if you're making transfers at the beginning of the week before midweek, say FA Cup fixtures or Champions League fixtures, that's a wild gamble. Like I'm sacrificing 0.1, 0.2 all day long to try and gather that extra information, because the last thing you want to do is, let's say, bring in a premium player like, say, Aguero. I'm just going to say he plays in the Champions League. Let's say he comes off the bench to try and score the winner or whatever, and ends up hurting his leg. And all of a sudden, you've just spent all of your money on a premium asset who's now not going to play at the weekend. And that scenario I've seen happen to people so many times. And this season, more than ever, with COVID around, it's just an absolute no-brainer. I mean, we've both been stung by it, haven't we, Chris? Like, I mean, well, have you? Yeah. I can certainly think when I have.
So I think earlier in the season when I'd already made... I mean, this was quite a late one, I suppose, but I'd already made my transfer, and then Mane got COVID and was obviously out. I think it was maybe rumoured on the day before or something. So I'd already made maybe the transfer that day. And this is why, even if you're committed to maybe making the transfer the day before the deadline, always wait until almost, you're going to bed, because anything can happen in that during the day. Obviously, there was rumours then Mane got COVID. He had COVID. Now I've got to suddenly take a -4 to bring Salah in. Whereas if I just waited, could have brought in Salah and just done a like-for-like swap. There we go, easy transfer. I think, you got stung with maybe Wilson, didn't you, earlier in the season when Newcastle game got postponed. And obviously we've seen a lot more of that with games getting postponed.
Was just to touch on that, and I shouldn't be begging for sympathy, but I mean, so as I said, I'm so against making early transfers, and I broke my one rule, and this is when I think a scenario is acceptable, when you have the exact funds for an optimal transfer, or let's say there's no other viable option. Like if you believe something to be truly optimal, then making the transfer a few days early, because obviously there's lots of resources where you can see prices moving up and down. But that, I believe, on FISA it was called Crack the Code. There's FPL Statistics, lots of Twitter users. I don't think this is, like, looking at it a different perspective, this is not cracking the code. It's a very minor advantage knowing when a player will go up or down in price. But if it's for the sake of knowing when to time your transfers, it is useful. There's no need to panic and make an early transfer if your player is nowhere even close to changing in price. Like, you should absolutely wait until at least until the day where they're going to change. But what happened with me was it was the day before the game week started, and I made the transfer one day. I made it in the evening. Do you know what? I think I broke my own rule. I think I had more funds than I needed, but Wilson was going to rise. I decided to make the transfer, and I woke up in the morning and it said Newcastle training ground, COVID outbreak. And when I saw that, I was just like, no, like just thinking they're going to cancel the bloody fixture, aren't they? And I think that was the first cancellation we saw of a COVID game.
Yeah, it was.
There's loads of them.
And I know what you mean. So, and I completely agree with that point, John, where if it's sometimes if you're going to if I'm going to do, say, this week, I was going to go, say, KDB and Vardy to Son and Kane, and I might have the exact funds to do that. And then I look at these sort of tools and it's like, okay, KDB and Vardy are going to drop. That's where I may be tempted to pull a little bit early. I still would never be doing it more than 2 days early, especially if there's games like FA Cup and Champions League and stuff like that that are still got to play. I would never do that before those games. But if that same scenario, I looked at it and go, actually, well, I've got 0.2 left. Okay, well, them two are going to drop tonight. So the worst case that's going to happen is I'm going to have the exact money to do it. People worry too much that they've lost that 0.2. And that's where it's not worth it, because as John said, you wake up the next day, suddenly there's been a COVID outbreak or there's been an injury in training and stuff like that. Because it's important to stress that this is not only this season. Obviously, there's probably more importance to do and follow that as sort of a principle this season because of COVID. But seasons before, there was still training injuries and illnesses that were happening that were ruling players out of games.
And people are making these risks ultimately, as you said, to make or save 0.1, 0.2 million.
Yeah.
And when you think about how useful that extra money really is, even if you've successfully managed to accumulate an extra 2 million by making early transfers and gambling, I mean, what kind of advantage is that going to give you in terms of points? And in all honesty, I truly do not believe that to be significant. There's few times in the season where I can think of a team, like a premium team I've managed to build, whereas if I missed out on just one of those players or I had just a little less flexibility, I would be penalized to a significant point margin. And I don't know. I mean, you make a transfer and they become injured. That is a serious hit in points. Like that. I mean, in the short term, that's going to cost a lot. I truly, the way I like to think of it, just to try and summarize this point, is if you're making optimal decisions, you're generally going to find yourself with well-performing players. Well-performing players are going to attract high ownership and see an increase in value, and they end up being kind of sleepers in your team, whether that's KDB, Salah, Son, Kane. I mean, the trend we've seen with those guys is they've been steady climbers because they're performing as they should be. In some cases, KDB maybe less so, just to be a bit more specific. But if they're doing well, they're going to go up in value. So keep calm and don't go crazy with that.
It's important to not beat yourself up as well, because I know maybe I did it as well in the double game week. I brought in Vardy for Kane, and 10 out of 10 times I would say I will make that decision again. Hindsight's a beautiful thing. Obviously, Kane gets 9 points. Vardy with 2 games gets 4 points. But it's still the right decision. You can't sort of think, I should have just kept Kane in. 2 games are always better than 1. And obviously, when you've got 2 premium assets, you're always going to go with the player that's got 2 games.
It's clear as day. I mean, just to say on that one, Kris, not only was Vardy had a better point scoring potential for that game week, but then looking beyond that game week, where, I mean, Leicester have their next 3 fixtures are a dream, or they're pretty nice. I mean, what I'll fire them up quickly, but what I'm saying is, if you compare that, Harry Kane has now Liverpool away to Brighton, then I believe he has West Brom. But I think Vardy over the next 3 would have been one of the highest scoring players in the game to own in your team. So the fact he's now picked up an injury and he didn't perform in that double game week is very unlucky. But this is FPL, and the way I like to think of it is, when I have a lot of bad luck, I know that I'm really lucky at points in the season. I also know that I'm really unlucky, and I know that I don't care. I just want to keep making good decisions, and it will work out. We can both think of moments where we've been unlucky, but
and you're always going to feel a bit crap about it, but it's important to bounce back and just keep making good decisions. Don't let it make you start making rash decisions and stuff like that. So I guess just to summarise then, so obviously we both got our wild card left. John, you've got your triple captain. I've got my bench boost. So really for the rest of the season, it's planning for those double game weeks ahead, planning for the blank game weeks. But it's all important to be flexible as well, because if I looked at this week, a few weeks ago, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go in after the double game week. That team is set up for game week 20. As you say, Leicester have got a good run. Vardy was a good transfer to bring in. I wasn't going to make any transfers, but now KDB injured, Vardy injured, stuff changes, and you now have to take a hit to change it. But that's why we love it, because you've just got to constantly adapt your plan and be flexible. I think is key.
I mean, I hate to say it, but the truth is that lots of managers that decide, right, this season I'm going to plan ahead, I'm going to take it really seriously. And when something goes wrong and their plans get teared apart, I mean, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but that's brilliant news for us, because at the end of I mean, when things go wrong, I kind of love it. Obviously, I hate it if it massively affects my team. But I love the chaos, because the game gets harder. The harder the game gets, then there's an opportunity to have a better edge on people. I mean, you look back, I tell you what was horrendously unlucky when the Man City game and the Spurs game both got cancelled in game week 17 or 16. I mean, those managers that had those players in their team really did get screwed over, to be honest, especially those, they were building for a certain double game week strategy. But then the following week, Man City and Spurs assets, they all delivered. So they kind of, I guess, they kind of paid back some of the points that were lost in that game week. That's quite a specific example, but yeah, keeping a cool head and being flexible with your plans is so important. And it's really good advice moving forward as well, because we have Ben's kind of probability of certain fixtures coming up, but that does not mean that you should follow that plan based on what's probably going to happen. You need to balance that in your decision making. And right now I'm thinking, well, Man City might double in 24. Man City's next 3 fixtures are really good. So I think as a priority, Man City assets right now are essential. You should have 3 in your team. That's my kind of, whereas it gets a bit more complicated if you say, well, Spurs double in 26. They have a really nice double. We need to build for them. But in the short term, they have some tricky fixtures. First fixture being Liverpool. Do you downgrade KDB to Son? Actually, maybe that transfer can wait, and you might want to go KDB to one of the cheaper City assets like Gundogan, I'm sure, or Foden. We'll touch on that a bit later, maybe. But what do you think on that, Chris? So, like, planning ahead.
I think
we go over the top, or
I think you're spot on with that. Really, I mean, I know myself. So the transfers I'll be doing is Vardy back to Kane, just to get Spurs coverage. I know Liverpool is a tough fixture. But I guess I have one eye on the future ahead, and there's not really another striker around that price point that I can look to bring in, unless I wanted to downgrade Vardy to someone like Watkins. But I still think there's more upside to owning Kane over someone like Watkins at this stage. Obviously, Watkins is going to double later on, and I can look at that. But that's sort of short term, and then to enable more funds, I've gone KDB to Gundogan as well, just to focus on that City assets. I mean, it was obviously tempting to go, right, well, I could just go straight back to Kane and Son, but because of the fixture run, I didn't really fancy having 2 of them.
That's pretty logical. I like your transfers. So just for those listening, Kris owns KDB and Vardy, both red flags, both out for multiple weeks. KDB, did I see 4 to 6 weeks potentially on KDB?
Yeah,
which
4
is
to 6 weeks. Yeah.
I mean, that's concerning because that runs into the double as well. And it might mean that the person you transfer him out for is actually going to be your City player in the double. And that is one of the reasons, bit of a tangent here, if you're thinking about Foden, which I have been heavily, you've got to factor in as a higher rotation risk. If you end up owning him for the entire period of KDB being out, including the double game week, then you've got that rotation to deal with the entire time. And all of a sudden, a more safer staple asset like Gundogan could be a shout, especially if he's on pens that entire time as well. So that's a good point. But yeah, sorry, the transfers you've done, you've got to shit. Obviously, you've made all of that extra money by going KDB to Gundogan, who I think looks like the optimal transfer. And we can maybe talk about why we think that's the case. And then, of course, Vardy being injured to Kane, you've got all those funds for premium, and ultimately you do need to build for the double Spurs assets. Kane and Son will be essential in 26. That's looking quite likely. And you've got some awkward fixtures to navigate with some good ones in the mix as well. But those two, I mean, they're going to go in with pretty high expected points in all scenarios. I think I'd have done exactly the same moves in your shoes, but it's never just a straightforward, just quickly make the transfers. You've got to plan ahead, and hopefully that will pay off for you, because I will likely do Gundogan as well.
Standard, John, just copying my transfers.
Here we go.
It's crazy though when you said at the start that our team has been fairly similar throughout. And what is there? Maybe a 75, 80 point difference, something like that, between our our teams. So yeah, definitely a lot of variance in there, but both making good decisions and both have well, you've obviously got a very nice rank. I've got a rank I'm okay with at the moment, but I've obviously got higher expectations for myself than being there, but still keeping cool and calm, and hopefully I'll get there by the end.
Yeah, I think it really is a marathon, and with all these extra doubles coming up, I guess this is aimed if you're at kind of a lower rank at the moment, there's going to be plenty of opportunities to make significant advances, and there's a lot of managers. I think you've been, I'd say, fairly unlucky in some situations, Kris, but there's some who've been horrendously unlucky and deserve to be much higher than they are, and there's going to be opportunities for them to get higher. The top winning, it's out of reach for them by now, but a respectable high finish is definitely on the cards. I think aiming for something like top 100k is more realistic in terms of what a good manager deserves if they put in a solid season. Like, I think that's a real achievement, getting top 100k.
Yeah, I think it's what we said at the start, and it's becoming a better achievement every year, isn't it? Because of as we talked about, the tools available, the platforms on Twitter and stuff like that, and all the resources there, and people just taking the game more seriously. So, but if you're still new and you don't finish in the top 100k, it doesn't mean you should give up as well.
No, it does.
As long as
give up.
No. I think the main thing is enjoying it, isn't it? Because I think we've all been there where we sort of think, oh, God, this game is ruining my life. But I think we're probably experienced enough to know now that how to handle that better. FPL is not the most. It's not the most important thing in your life. It's definitely not.
It is.
It should be fun at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But we're all competitive and we want to win. So.
Yeah, it's hard to, when you're in a certain kind of mood and it just all goes wrong in the football. I tell you what, I've been building for game week 19 since game week 14, like doing some really quite obscene, I brought in Anguissa in game week 14 in preparation for the double in 19. Like, that's next level planning ahead. Like all these kind of I had Areola come in 15 as well. So lots of these kind of obscure transfers way in advance. But ultimately, I was going into the double with 3 Leeds players, 2 Saints, and it was teed up perfectly. And when the fixture was cancelled, you do feel really down about it, and you're spot on, Kris. You need to say, like, hey, it's just a game. Everyone else is experiencing similar. Exactly. Some have got out a bit luckier than others, but it is what it is. We just take it on the chin.
Exactly, and we be flexible and just keep planning ahead and just think about the next week ahead that you've got to plan for, the next several weeks ahead.
So, Kris, I have a slightly different. It comes back to the transfer you made on bringing in Gundogan. I want to learn your thought process of going KDB to Gundogan, because in doing so, you've brought in a 5.5 million player for an 11.8 million, 11.9 million player.
Yeah.
So you could have went premium. What made you choose Gundogan? Because there's a long list of viable options.
And to be honest, maybe a couple of years ago, I know a couple of years ago, I would not have made that transfer. And that's probably where I probably made transfers more on, football knowledge, as I've said before. Whereas now, looking at the data models and stuff like that, Gundogan was favourable in terms of all predicted points. I think his goal score odds are still decent as well. As you say, he's on penalties as well. So it's all these things that you think about. And I think because I'm now planning for 26 and probably bench boosting, I think it was a way of, I need to upgrade certain areas in my team, which is the likes of Steer, the 4 million keeper, who's not going to play in a double game week, because obviously I've already got Martinez. So I need to be looking to upgrade the goalkeeper. I need to be looking to upgrade my 4.3 million midfielder and Dale Stevens, because he's not going to play. So there's all these things I was considering that I need to upgrade him, and it gives me the ability to upgrade someone like a Stevens to a Son, to a Rashford if they've got a good double game week, and then I'm pretty happy with that. I think at the start of the season, I wasn't too crazy about some of these 5 million, 5.5 million midfielders, but
Yeah.
you've got to sort of jump on them when they present themselves, I think, to be a good optimal pick. Because I think at the start of the season there was likes of Pedence and Susek and stuff like that, but I think we played down players like that, and advised managers not to go for players like that at the start, and we were right in our advice really, because neither of them did really a lot, and they take up a lot of value in your team, don't they?
They do, because that's a really interesting one. Like that 5.5 bracket in the midfield. I think when you're going to bring in, let's say, I'm just going to say a decent, viable midfielder, the starting price is usually around 5.56 million, which is 1 or 1.5 million above that 4.5 million base. And if you look at the defense, where for just 0.5 above the base unlocks all of the 4.5 options, like Soufal was on that list, for example, someone who's done very well, Walker Peters, Lamptey, these were all 4.5s.
Yeah.
And it's like
Dallas, Ailing, there's lots of them.
Right, yeah. I mean, I would all season, I mean, I'd rather be, I know 3-4-3 has been kind of the consensus optimal format, but I mean, if you picked one of the 5.5s at the beginning, like Armstrong or ASM, like these were the names we were talking about. Like, okay, Pedence and Neto have done okay in patches. Neto more so. But yeah, it's just being kind of not being rigid in your decision making. That's a really, really good point, like a good reflective point. And on your point on Gundogan, I mean, okay, he just happens to be 5.5 million. But that decision, I know one thing I noticed when I went on Twitter, everyone was, right, Gundogan, I say everyone, just the few people I follow and see other tweets being shared, starting to see a bit of a consensus towards Gundogan. And I hate the idea of following that crowd. So I want to, with real rigor, try and look at all of the viable options, and in my head work out, is Gundogan truly optimal? And you've got to say, I mean, you could just do a straight swap to Sterling, another premium player, and that way you've got someone who's very likely to start every game, who goes in with, well, he almost seems twice as likely to score than Gundogan in any game. That's a net, like on odds. Sterling goes in at 5-4. Gundogan, I believe, is 23-20. So Gundogan, 30% versus Sterling, 48%, 47% anytime goal scorer odds. So Sterling's obviously way better. But for all that extra money, I mean, by going to Gundogan, that's 7.5 million. As you said, that enables you to upgrade a midfielder to Son next week. Or for me, it enables me, and for many other managers, it would enable someone like Shea Adams or a cheap striker straight to Harry Kane. But yeah, you also need to weigh that up. I mean, not only are the City assets viable, you could go KDB to Sterling, to Gundogan, to Foden, who I touched on briefly, to Bilver, who I know some have talked about. But then there's also Leicester assets that we need to target for the double game week. They've got good fixtures in front of them. Why shouldn't we look at Harvey Barnes or Maddison? Why shouldn't we just bring in Son straight away? There's so many like different angles at it. And I think for us to really have an edge, you've got to really drill down and plan ahead, look at the fixtures for each of those teams, look at the expected points for for that player in the upcoming fixtures. And at the end of the day, we landed on Gundogan. I think he looks like the optimal option to me, and it could sound silly because he could do nothing for the next 3 game weeks while Sterling, Foden and Bilver clean up, but I'm okay with it for now.
Yeah, and I think I think there's a bit of an element of the eye test as well. I think this is where we've been maybe a little bit lucky this year, because every single game is live. We've not had that in previous seasons. So there would have been games that you missed, whereas now, sometimes it makes it worse. We talked about FPL depression earlier. So when the likes of Vardy had 7 shots against Saints at home, it makes you feel worse because it's like, come on, just score one of them. But it also makes you watch, a lot of the games, and you see a lot more. And I think when I've watched Gundogan recently, I've always sort of seen him as, you think he's a defensive midfielder. He's not really someone who's going to chip him with a lot of goals, but he's getting into the box a lot. He's playing quite advanced. And I think with KDB out, maybe he's likely to play even more advanced as well. So weighing all that up, including all the stuff you've mentioned, John, around odds and projected points and fixtures and stuff, I think it was a good pick. And as I said, it allowed me to consider future plans of upgrading another midfielder to someone like Son or Rashford or someone like that.
Where's your current mind at in terms of it was pretty stressful in the run up to the double, and I felt like we were just planning frantically for weeks with the free hit and the bench boost. Where are you at now? Like, now that that's out the way, can we take a breather? A bit more chilled?
I think so, yeah. I think so I obviously went for the triple captain in the double game weeks of Salah, so that did not pay off. So it was a bit of even though it was a fairly decent week, I still got a green arrow. It was quite disheartening as well with Vardy and Salah not really doing the business when they had the chances to do so. But yeah, I think a lot more calmer now. I think it didn't have obviously the 2 injuries, but as you say, you've got to roll with the punches, haven't you? You've got to just adapt whatever plans you've got. As long as you've got that sort of target in your head of future game weeks, whether it's a double game week or something that you're going to target, and that doesn't change as the ultimate goal that you're going to aim for, if it's a chip that you're going to use, you still need to be flexible in the short term, but with one eye on that, I think. But yeah, I mean, I feel fairly okay, I guess. How about you?
Yeah. Well, it's like a massive breather, isn't it? Because it's not like we're going to world card anytime soon. So it's really just riding the fixtures. The doubles are nice and easy to plan for. So I think, it's a good opportunity to take a breather. Like I took a -12 in the double game week, which, I think to many managers that will sound mad. Like, some people will be completely against hits. That's where something like FPL Review, which shows you expected points for a double game week, all of a sudden you can justify a 4-point switch in one move. But you need to be careful with that. You absolutely do. But I mean, I was looking at the likes of swapping, say, Walker Peters for John Stones. That obviously worked out pretty well, as we all know. But in that scenario, I mean, that's where Walker Peters, I think, was only forecast. It's a really pathetic amount of points. 2 quite tough away fixtures. Away
to Leicester, was it?
Yeah. The Leeds, away to Leeds. And
because they didn't have a double, did they? They just played
Leicester apologies. Away. Yeah, sorry, that was no, you're right. So yeah, he was forecast like 2 points,
2.5,
and whereas Stones goes in forecast 10. So and then ends up walking away with 50,000, because I mean there was a massive overperformance, but you can see justifying some of these moves. That's where these tools come in quite handy. But I'm chilled. I'm very chilled.
As I said, it was the same with my KDB and Vardy, and it doesn't always pay off, but it was still the right move. It just didn't pay off. But in the long run, keep making decisions like that, you will keep climbing. So yeah.
A nice way, I think, to wrap up this, because if you've made it this far, then
no one's made it this far.
yeah. Let's be honest. We are just purely talking to each other at this point. But I think if we just summarize the transfers that people are going to be making, so let's say just top targets in each bracket. Let's get rid of goalkeeper, because most people have a goalkeeper by now. If you don't, good luck to you. But in defence, who's the person we want to target the most?
Cancelo.
Agree. 100% agree. I'm glad you said that name. I mean, to be fair, the Man City, Diaz or Stones is not bad either, but amazing fixtures for City.
Yeah.
Clean sheet run of a lifetime.
I think, Walker's injured as well, so looks good for Cancelo.
He did play in the second game with Walker in the squad, which was interesting. Did he play instead of Zinchenko in their second game of the double? Can you remember that? So was he on the left, or because Because I know he can play each side. Or did he play in like a DM role?
I think he was on the left.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds about
But
right.
he did play, I think he came on in midfield against Cheltenham. So maybe it's a sign of something to happen. But again, this is where we've watched a lot of the games, and I think he's been pretty unlucky. You know, he's at the post a couple of times, had some good chances to score, looks really good attacking threat-wise. And you've sort of got to jump with these players, well, when they've got a really nice fixture run and it's sort of vindicated with expected points and from what you've seen as well. I think it was quite similar with Chilwell earlier on in the season. You know, he came in, he got rid of his injury concerns at Chelsea, started banging in assists and stuff like that. And it was, right, Chelsea got a nice fixture run, let's jump on. And that paid off massively for those that jumped on him. I think this is a similar one with Cancelo.
Weirdly, you mentioned Chilwell. He's still a keep for me.
He's still a good option, yeah.
Yeah, like lots of people will have completely gone off Chelsea with their kind of bad run of form. But again, take a deep breath and start having a look at the anytime goal scorer odds. The anytime clean sheet odds, and Chelsea's next few games are quite favourable. And Chilwell has played in a really advanced role for Chelsea, consistently teeing up chances, having shots. I mean, I think he's been a great asset to own. So
yeah, the only worry now for me is obviously new managers going to come in. So Lampard was obviously sacked today. Maybe he won't like Chilwell. Maybe he wants to play Emerson or Alonso. That's the only thing. Lampard was quite. I think Alonso's still there. Yeah, I think Lampard's been quite. You know, if Chilwell's fit, he's going to play, which was a nice position to be in because you always knew he was going to be starting. Unlike someone like Reece James that he was a little unsure with. But so midfield then?
So I think most people are looking to swap out KDB. So it's who do you replace? Who's the optional option? I think we touched on it.
The gun dog.
The gun dog. Say no more. We've covered that in great depth. And if someone skipped ahead to this point, then you can randomly skip to parts of the videos, try and find our 10-minute gun dog discussion. I mean, unless there's anything else you want to add, Kris.
No, we've covered that. Yeah.
He plays for Man City.
Strikers then. So I'd probably say, it depends who you own, I guess, at this stage, but probably Kane and Watkins, the two I'd pull out. Obviously, if you've got the funds to go to another premium striker, I wouldn't look past Kane because he's the only one in that bracket that's going to be playing. And Watkins is obviously, we've mentioned it, they've got games in hand. They're going to have double game weeks coming up. Villa look pretty good. He's been probably a bit unlucky this season with finishing, but scored in his last game. So,
yeah, I'm just going to say at this stage, most people own Bamford, but some people don't.
Yeah.
And for those that don't, I mean, Bamford still, and I kind of like the fact that it's been a bit quiet for Bamford in the last few weeks, and some people don't have him because I still think he's the most ridiculously underpriced player in the game right now, given that he's now on penalties for an extremely attacking, out of form Leeds side, I guess. Slightly out of form, let's say. Bamford as well, brilliant option. Watkins, as you said, game in hand. I think Watkins is a great shout. But yeah, when do we bring in Kane? Because I would actually avoid him this week. I know I'm not saying that bringing him in this week is like you have the funds to do that for Vardy. And I guess if money was no object, Kane's the best option. So let's bring him in. And to be honest, money is no object for you right now because you've done the Gundog transfer. I need to stop calling him that. But yeah, and then if budget's more of an issue, yeah, you've got some amazing options in the lower bracket still. I think you can make a good case for Antonio, Bamford, Watkins.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I guess my thought process behind Kane is, I had Vardy, so it was quite an easy transfer. I wanted to keep that premium striker in there. Liverpool obviously had a tough game against Man United last night. So they'll probably be a bit more fatigued going into that game against Tottenham. And Tottenham have been pretty good in the big games, as they call it this season. So, and he's on penalties. And obviously Brighton away in the next fixture. And then against an out-of-form Chelsea side before they play West Brom. So it's not It's not ideal run of fixtures, but it's not terrible, and I'm happy to have one Spurs asset in there for that run. But yeah, I think that's probably a good time to end, John.
I agree. We've been rambling for far too long, but if you have enjoyed this format, please let us know or like this episode, and we will, of course, be back for more.
Yeah, we should say, obviously, it's not going to be this long every week.
Yes, it will. Longer.
It's just because it's a sort of mid-season thoughts episode. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed it.
That's the title right there. Mid-season.
Please subscribe, and that's it.
Thanks for tuning in.
Cheers, guys. See you later.